The sound of clanking metal echoed through the dim, cold corridors of the alien prison. The humans were trapped, locked away by the very beings that had cast them aside. These prisoners, most of whom were mechanics and engineers, had once been overlooked by the aliens. Now they were imprisoned, their skills taken for granted, their fate seemingly sealed. But what the aliens did not realize was that these humans were far more than simple workers. At first, the humans did not understand why they had been taken. They were just mechanics, right? They fixed ships, built engines, and repaired weapons. But something about them was different, something that even the alien leaders had failed to notice. The humans had an uncanny ability to understand the most advanced alien technology, and they could fix or modify things that the aliens themselves could not. They were the silent force behind the scenes, and now, locked away, they were becoming something more. Captain Jace Sterling paced the floor of his cell, his eyes scanning the walls as he thought of the impossible task ahead. He had been in this prison for what felt like years, but the fire within him had not died. Jace had been a soldier before all of this, and soldiers never gave up. Not on Earth, and certainly not on the humans they had left behind in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. He glanced over at his fellow prisoners. The others, mostly mechanics and engineers, sat in silence. They were all skilled in their own ways, and their skills were the key to their survival. But in this place, their hands were shackled, their minds bound by the walls around them. Their only hope was Jace. He had seen something in them, something that even the aliens had failed to notice. "You know," Jace spoke up, his voice low but steady. "They think we're nothing but tools. But they've made a mistake. We're not just here to fix their ships. We're here to change the game. And I have a feeling we're going to make them regret ever locking us up." One of the mechanics, a quiet man named Draven, looked up from the corner where he was sitting. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes glimmered with hope. "You really think we can do something?" he asked. "They have us locked up tight. We can barely even move without one of them watching us." Jace walked over to the cell door and placed his hand against it, as though feeling the pulse of the prison. "That's exactly why they're going to regret it. They don't know what they're dealing with. They think they've won, that they've broken us. But the truth is, they've only given us time. Time to think, time to plan." Jace turned back to the group, his eyes burning with determination. "We've spent years fixing their ships, understanding their technology. We know what makes their systems tick. All we need is the right moment, and we'll break free. They don't understand. They never will." The group fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. They were beaten, locked away in a cell, and yet Jace's confidence was infectious. Slowly, the others began to nod. One by one, they stood up, their eyes filled with a new sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, they felt something. Hope. It was the beginning of something new. The days stretched on, but the plan began to take shape. Jace, Draven, and the others used every scrap of material they could find to begin working on their escape. It wasn't much, but they had learned long ago that nothing was ever impossible if they were willing to put in the work. The mechanics had a way of seeing the potential in things, seeing how everything could be fixed, repaired, or repurposed. In the dead of night, when the guards had grown complacent, they would sneak into the hallways, gathering whatever tools they could find. They were small, seemingly insignificant items, but to the mechanics, they were keys to their freedom. It was a slow process, but each step brought them closer to breaking out. The aliens had underestimated them. They had thought the humans would fall in line, that they would become subservient. But Jace knew better. Humans were resilient. They had survived countless wars, insurmountable odds, and unimaginable hardships. They were survivors, and now they were ready to rise. And then came the day when it all changed. Jace had been working on a plan to hack into the prison's communication system, but something unexpected happened. One of the guards slipped up. In a rare moment of inattention, the alien lowered his guard just long enough for Jace to make his move. With a swift, calculated strike, Jace incapacitated the guard and took his weapon. "Go," he whispered urgently to Draven, who had been waiting nearby. "We don't have much time." Draven nodded, and with a look of fierce determination, darted out of the shadows. He quickly disabled the security systems, and within moments, the entire cell block was free. The humans had broken out, but this was just the beginning. The real fight was about to begin. They had no weapons, no ships, and no allies. Yet they were determined to fight. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And so, the rebellion began. The alien overlords may have thought they had defeated Earth, but they had no idea what they were up against. The humans, once considered nothing more than mechanics, had become something more, something far greater than anyone had ever anticipated. The fight for freedom had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. As Jace led his group of rebels through the corridors of the prison, the sound of clanging footsteps echoed through the halls. The aliens were coming, but this time, it was the humans who held the power. They had the skills, the knowledge, and the drive to fight back, and they weren't going to stop until the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity would never be broken. The break from the prison was only the first step in a much larger, more dangerous journey. Jace and the others had escaped, but they knew that the fight wasn't over. They couldn't afford to rest, not even for a moment. The alien overlords were sure to notice their disappearance soon, and when they did, they would send everything they had to hunt them down. The humans were only a small group with no ship, no allies, and only their skills to rely on. Yet, somehow, they felt more powerful now than ever before. As Jace led the group through the underground prison tunnels, their hearts pounded with anticipation. They had broken free from their cells, but that was just the beginning. The real danger lay in the vast corridors of the alien stronghold, filled with armed guards and high-tech security systems. They had no idea how far this would go, or how much time they had before the aliens realized what was happening. But there was no turning back now. The fight for their freedom had begun. "We need to find a way out of here," Jace said, his voice low but firm. "The longer we stay in these tunnels, the more likely we are to get caught. We have to move quickly and find a way to reach the surface." Draven, who had been quietly studying their surroundings, pointed to a control panel up ahead. "There's a control room just past that door," he said. "We can disable their security systems, maybe even get a signal out to Earth. If we're lucky, we might be able to call for reinforcements." Jace nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. Earth. They hadn't been able to contact Earth since they were captured, but if they could reach out now, they might stand a chance. They weren't alone in this fight. Humanity was vast and strong. They had never been just tools to the alien overlords, and Jace had a feeling that the rest of the world would soon learn just how far the humans would go to win back their freedom. The group moved cautiously down the dark, narrow tunnel. Every sound seemed to echo, and every step felt like it could be their last. As they approached the control room, they could hear the faint hum of alien technology, the buzz of surveillance equipment. They were getting close. Jace signaled to Draven, who moved to the control panel. He worked quickly, his fingers moving over the alien technology with ease. The humans may have been prisoners for a time, but they were not weak. They were survivors. Every day spent in captivity had taught them more about the aliens' technology, and now it was time to use that knowledge to their advantage. The control panel flickered, then went dark. A loud buzz echoed through the hallway, followed by the sudden silence of deactivated security systems. "We've got a window," Draven said, his face lighting up with relief. "We can move through the base without triggering alarms for a short time." Jace motioned for the group to follow him. "Let's move then. We don't have much time." The group hurried through the dark corridors, their steps light but swift. They were getting closer to their goal, freedom. But even as the hope of escape filled their hearts, They knew the hardest part was still to come. They had broken out of prison, but they were far from safe. They still needed a way off this alien world, a way to return to Earth and prepare for the war that was surely coming. As they reached the base's surface level, the air seemed to grow heavier, more oppressive. The weight of what lay ahead hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. Jace could feel the tension in the air, the fear and the determination mixed together. They were no longer prisoners. They were rebels, and they were fighting for something much bigger than themselves. They stepped out into the open, and for the first time in years, the group of humans could see the sky. It wasn't Earth's sky, but it was still a sky, a symbol of the freedom they were fighting for. Jace paused for a moment, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. "We're not done yet," he said quietly. "But we're not alone either. We've got the skills, and now we've got the chance to do something bigger. Let's make it count." The group of humans stood together, ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead would be dangerous. The aliens would hunt them, and the galaxy would soon know the price of underestimating humanity. But Jace knew one thing for sure. They would never stop fighting. The rebellion had begun, and they would stop at nothing to take back their future. As the night sky loomed above them, the humans felt a spark of hope that had long been lost. They were going to win this fight, not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. The silence after the group's escape felt overwhelming, but it was the kind of silence that came before a storm. The humans had made it past the security systems, but now they had to face a bigger challenge: their survival on an alien world far from Earth. With every step they took, the realization hit them harder. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for the future of humanity itself. Jace could feel the weight of leadership on his shoulders. As they moved deeper into the alien base, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder at the others. Draven, the tech expert, was already scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. Kira, the strategist, had her eyes constantly darting around, calculating their every move. Every person in the group had a role, and without their combined strength, they never would have made it this far. But now, the real work was about to begin. "We need to get to the main transport hub," Jace said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. "That's where we'll find the ships we can use to get out of here. We can't waste time." As they moved through the facility, the air grew colder. The walls were lined with unfamiliar technology, alien machines that seemed to hum with energy. But there was no time to explore. The humans had a single goal: escape. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed down the corridor. The group froze, their hearts racing. Jace's first instinct was to move toward cover, but he quickly realized it was too late. The aliens had discovered their escape. They could hear the heavy footsteps of the guards rushing down the hallway, their weapons ready. They were not just going to let the humans go without a fight. "Move, now," Jace yelled. Kira's hand shot up, signaling a change in direction. She had been studying the map of the alien base for hours and knew the quickest route to the transport hub. The group sprinted down the hallway, desperate to stay one step ahead of the oncoming patrols. Every second counted. They could hear the aliens' voices getting closer, their movements synchronized and precise. As they turned a corner, Jace could see the faint outline of the transport hub door in the distance. It was their last hope. If they could just reach it, they would have a chance at escaping the alien planet. But the closer they got, the more it felt like the walls were closing in on them. "We're almost there," Jace said through gritted teeth, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "Just a little further." But the aliens weren't going to make it easy. As they neared the door, the sound of blaster fire filled the air. The group ducked for cover as the shots missed narrowly. Jace's mind raced. They had to break through the door, but they had no key, no way to disable the security system. But then he remembered something. The control panel outside the door. Draven could hack into it. "Draven, now," Jace shouted. Draven didn't hesitate. He rushed to the control panel, his fingers flying over the alien keypad. Seconds felt like hours, but finally, the doors slid open with a hiss. They were in. The transport hub was a vast, open space filled with alien ships, some massive and sleek, others smaller and heavily armed. This was it, their way out. But it wasn't going to be easy. The ships were guarded, and Jace knew that the aliens would stop at nothing to prevent them from escaping. "We need a ship, and we need it now," Jace said. He could hear the aliens closing in, and time was running out. Kira's sharp eyes scanned the room. There. She pointed to a medium-sized ship at the far end of the hangar. It was a little old, but it would do. It was their best chance. The group rushed toward the ship, but as they approached, they were met by a squad of alien soldiers. There was no way around them. The humans were cornered. Jace drew his weapon, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been a fighter, but this was the moment. This was the moment when humanity's will would be tested. Would they run, or would they fight for their future? The answer came without hesitation. They would fight. A firefight erupted in the transport hub. Blaster fire lit up the room, and the humans fought with every ounce of strength they had. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving to the universe that humanity wasn't to be underestimated. The aliens thought they could control them, imprison them, but they had no idea what they had awakened. The fire of rebellion burned bright in the hearts of these humans, and they weren't going down without a fight. Jace took down one soldier, then another. His hand shook, but his resolve was unwavering. This wasn't just for them. It was for Earth, for the billions of people who didn't even know the galaxy was at war. He would make sure humanity's story would be remembered, no matter what. The battle was intense, but they kept pushing forward. Finally, they reached the ship, and Jace quickly activated the controls. The engines hummed to life, and they were airborne. But the fight wasn't over yet. The alien forces would pursue them, and they would need to outmaneuver them if they were going to survive. As the ship soared into space, Jace looked out the window at the planet below. They had made it out. But the real battle was just beginning. The stars stretched out before them, a vast sea of light, but Jace didn't feel the beauty of it. His focus was on the task ahead. They had escaped the alien base, but now they were in the unknown, far from Earth, and their problems were far from over. The alien forces would be after them, hunting them across the stars, and the odds were stacked against them. But Jace knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back. "Kira, how long until we reach the rendezvous point?" Jace asked, gripping the control panel tightly as the ship shook slightly from the strain of high-speed travel. Kira's eyes were fixed on the star map, her mind calculating their path through the deep void of space. At least 12 hours. Maybe less if we pushed the ship harder, but I wouldn't recommend it. The ship is old, and we don't want to risk engine failure. Jace nodded grimly. They couldn't afford any mistakes now. The humans had made it this far, but there was still much to do. They needed allies, resources, and most importantly, they needed to stay hidden from the aliens who had been hunting them. The only place they could go for help was the rebel fleet, a group of outcasts, mercenaries, and freedom fighters who had been fighting the alien invaders for years. But would they accept the humans who had just escaped from the clutches of the enemy? As the hours passed, the tension inside the ship grew. Draven, who had been monitoring the systems, was the first to break the silence. "We've got incoming," he shouted. His voice was tight with urgency. Jace's heart skipped a beat. "How many?" he asked quickly, moving to the navigation console. 3 ships. They're coming in fast," Draven replied, tapping on the console. "They're not from the base, though. These are independent mercenaries. They must have gotten a tip-off that we were escaping." Kira's face hardened as she looked at the radar. "We can't outrun them. We're too far from the rendezvous point, and we don't have the firepower to fight them off." Jace knew that they had only one choice: fight. He looked at the crew, their faces a mix of determination and fear. Prepare for combat. We hold them off long enough to make it to the rendezvous point. If we fight smart, we can win. The ship shook again as the first of the mercenary ships fired. Jace's hands flew over the controls, evading the incoming blast with quick, sharp maneuvers. The ship rocked again, this time with a heavier thud as one of the enemy's blasts grazed their side. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, and the ship's energy shield was starting to fail. "We can't take too many more of those," Draven warned, his voice strained. "The shields are at 30%. We need to get out of here before we're sitting ducks." Kara was already plotting their escape route, her fingers flying across the console. "There's a nebula nearby. It's dense enough that the enemy ships won't be able to track us easily. If we can get in there, we might have a chance to lose them." Jace's mind raced. They didn't have much time. The nebula was their best chance, but it would also be dangerous. The magnetic fields could disrupt their navigation systems, and it would be easy to get lost. But there was no other option. "Draven, Kira, get ready to make a hard turn. We'll dive into the nebula and hope the mercenaries can't follow us," Jace ordered, his voice calm but firm. The ship lurched as the crew followed Jace's instructions. The engines roared as they angled into the nebula, the view outside shifting from stars to a blur of colorful gas clouds. The nebula's dense clouds of gas and dust seemed like a sanctuary, a temporary refuge in a galaxy full of danger. But the mercenary ships were not far behind. The first enemy ship followed them into the nebula, unwilling to let their prey slip away so easily. As the ship entered the nebula, the crew felt the intensity of the situation. They were trapped in a beautiful but hostile place, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Jace's hands were steady as he adjusted the ship's course, trying to avoid detection. The dense gas swirled around them, a thick fog that made it hard to see anything. They couldn't rely on their sensors here, so it was all about feeling their way through, trusting their instincts and each other. The ship swerved around a massive gas cloud, narrowly avoiding a collision. But just as they thought they had lost the enemy, the sound of enemy ship engines roared through the nebula, getting louder by the second. "They're getting closer," Kira said, her voice tense. "We need to shake them off before we run out of room to maneuver." Jace's thoughts raced. There was one last trick they could try. He quickly turned the ship and dove into a dense part of the nebula, where the gas was so thick that visibility was almost zero. They couldn't see the enemy anymore, but the question was, could the enemy see them? They held their breath, listening to the hum of their ship's engine, hoping the mercenaries couldn't pick up their trail. The minutes seemed to stretch on forever. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, the sound of the enemy ships faded away. The mercenaries had lost them. The crew exhaled in relief, but Jace knew that this was only a temporary victory. The danger was far from over. "We made it," Jace said, his voice low. "But we're not out of the woods yet." The journey was far from finished, and with the enemy still in pursuit, the humans would need to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than ever. The future of humanity depended on it. The crew's nerves were still frayed from their escape through the nebula, but the relief they'd felt only moments ago quickly faded. They were no longer in immediate danger, but the threat was far from over. The mercenaries may have lost them in the thick clouds, but they knew that they wouldn't stop chasing. Humanity had just become a target, and the galaxy wasn't as safe as they had once believed. Jace stood at the helm, his fingers gripping the controls with a tight, unyielding force. His mind was focused, calculating their next move. "Kira, Draven, check the systems again. We can't afford another slip-up. If we've lost the mercenaries for now, we need to move fast." Kira's voice came through the intercom. "We're good. Shields are recharging, and the engine's holding steady. But the longer we stay here, the more chance the enemy will regroup." Jace nodded. "We'll use the time we've bought to get to the rendezvous point. We'll contact the fleet for reinforcements." It was risky. The rendezvous point wasn't far, but it was still in enemy territory. A few hours of travel could mean everything to the success of their mission. They couldn't afford to be caught again. Not now. Draven entered the cockpit, his face grim. "Jace, I've been going over the logs, and there's something you need to see." Jace turned to him, eyebrow raised. "What is it?" "It's about the mercenaries. They weren't hired just for us. They're hunting anyone who's been against the Alien Council." Draven paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The attack on Earth. That was just the beginning. The Council's growing power is attracting more of these bounty hunters. Jace's heart sank. The reality of their situation hit harder than ever before. The Council's reach wasn't just limited to their base. It had stretched across the galaxy, hunting down anyone who opposed them. The humans, despite their ingenuity, had become a threat to a system they didn't fully understand. "Then we need to move faster," Jace said, determination in his voice. "We're not just running from mercenaries. We're running from an empire." The crew's expressions darkened as the weight of his words settled over them. The rebels and the mercenaries were just pawns in a much larger game. If humanity was to survive, they would need to outsmart not only the Council, but also the galaxy's most dangerous factions. They resumed their journey through the depths of space, keeping their course steady but wary. The vastness of space was a paradox. They were free to travel anywhere, yet everywhere they went, danger followed. The ship's engines hummed steadily, but Jace's mind was a whirlwind of strategies. Every decision they made had to be the right one. Every mistake could be their last. As they neared the rendezvous point, Jace couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The galaxy felt different now. No longer was it a place of exploration and wonder. It had become a deadly battlefield, and the humans were caught in the crossfire. The feeling of tension in the cockpit was palpable. Even the air felt heavier, thick with the weight of uncertainty. Kira broke the silence. "We're almost there. Just a few more minutes, and we'll be in range." Jace's grip tightened on the control stick. "Keep your eyes open. If they're following us, they'll strike soon." Sure enough, as the ship entered a new sector of space, a warning light blinked on the console. Their sensors had picked up movement. They weren't alone anymore. The mercenaries had found them again. "They've caught up with us," Draven shouted, his voice tight with panic. Jace quickly scanned the radar. 3 ships. Not mercenaries this time, but something worse. The symbols on the radar made his stomach drop. These were military-grade ships, well-equipped and clearly dangerous. They had more than just mercenaries on their tail now. "Kira, Draven, I need you to get us into evasive maneuvers. We have to lose them," Jace ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Kira's hands moved fast over the controls, directing the ship into a tight loop, but the enemy ships were relentless. The first barrage of fire came in fast, narrowly missing the ship's hull. The blast rattled the entire vessel, shaking the crew to their core. "We can't dodge them forever," Kira said, her voice strained. Jace's mind raced, but his voice remained calm. "We won't have to. We need to get close to the asteroid field up ahead. It's risky, but it'll buy us time." Kira didn't hesitate. She angled the ship toward the asteroid field, where massive rocks floated in a deadly dance. The proximity of the asteroids would make it hard for the enemy ships to target them, but Jace knew it would also slow them down. "Hold on tight," Kira warned, her hand steady on the controls as she weaved the ship through the field. The ship jolted again as a blast from the enemy nearly hit them, but the maneuver brought them closer to the asteroids, using them as shields. Jace's heart pounded in his chest as the enemy ships struggled to adjust to the maze of obstacles. They were losing ground, but so was he. Their chances of survival depended on how long they could keep the enemy distracted. "We can't hold them off forever," Jace muttered under his breath. "We need to make it to the fleet. They're our only chance." With the asteroid field ahead and the enemy hot on their tail, the crew braced themselves for what was sure to be their hardest fight yet. But there was one thing Jace knew for sure, no matter the cost. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The asteroid field loomed ahead, massive chunks of rock floating in the void. The ship swerved and darted between the obstacles, each one narrowly avoiding the deadly collision. Jace gripped the seat in front of him, his eyes scanning the readouts on the control panel. Every movement of the ship calculated and precise. The mercenaries weren't far behind, their ships fast and deadly, but the asteroid field was their advantage, at least for now. Kira's voice broke through the tension. They're still on us. The first two ships are right behind, but one is falling back. They're likely waiting for us to slip up. Jace's teeth clenched. We can't afford that. We have to get to the fleet before the reinforcements arrive. The seconds felt like hours as the crew navigated through the asteroid field. Each turn, each sudden maneuver was more frantic than the last. The ship shook under another near miss from enemy fire, a blast so close that sparks shot across the cockpit. "Status report," Jace barked. "Shields are holding, but just barely," Kira answered. "Hull integrity is at 70%. If they get another hit in, we could be in trouble." Jace's mind raced. They had to do something drastic, something unexpected. If the fleet wasn't within range, they would be caught, and whatever hope they had left would be gone. "Draven, you said you could hack into their systems, right? Is there any chance you can interfere with their targeting systems?" Draven, who had been hunched over a terminal in the back of the ship, paused. His fingers hovered over the keys, eyes narrowed in concentration. "It's possible," he said slowly, his voice tight with focus. "I can jam their sensors temporarily, but it won't be for long. We need to make it count." Jace nodded. "Do it. We don't have time to waste." Draven began working quickly, his hands flying over the keyboard as he accessed the enemy ship's communication systems. The tension in the air was thick as the ship swerved again, narrowly avoiding an asteroid. The enemy ships were closing in, their weapons charging. The crew had no idea how long they could keep this up. "Done," Draven finally shouted, his face lighting up with relief. "I've scrambled their targeting. They'll be blind for the next 30 seconds. "Perfect," Jace muttered under his breath, his eyes flashing with determination. "Kira, full speed ahead. We're making a break for it." The ship surged forward, gaining speed as it blasted out of the asteroid field. The mercenary ships, temporarily blinded by the hack, had to make quick adjustments to keep up. But they weren't fast enough. "Go! Go! Go!" Jace shouted. The ship darted forward, and for a brief moment, it felt like they might escape. The mercenary ships were slow to adjust. Their sensors scrambled, their firing range reduced to blind luck. It was their chance. Just as they neared the edge of the asteroid field, Jace caught sight of something on the horizon. His heart skipped a beat. There, the fleet. He pointed to the ships emerging from a nearby nebula. The reinforcements had arrived. Kira's eyes widened. "We're almost there." But just as they thought they had made it, a sharp warning beep echoed through the cockpit. One of the mercenary ships had regained its senses and was firing its cannons, a blast that shot straight for the ship. Jace gritted his teeth, fighting to keep his hand steady. "Kira, evasive maneuvers. Now," Jace screamed. The ship lurched as Kira threw the ship into a barrel roll, narrowly avoiding the deadly blast. The energy from the blast skimmed their hull, sending the ship into a spin. "Stabilizers are failing," Kira shouted, panic rising in her voice. Jace's stomach dropped. They were too close to the fleet, too close to safety, and yet still too far away to be sure of victory. "We're not losing this," Jace muttered, gritting his teeth. "Kira, get us on a direct line to the fleet. Draven, prepare to contact them. I need that backup now." Draven's fingers moved with urgency as he began tapping into the fleet's communication channels. "Sending the signal now," he called out. "They'll know we're here, but we need to get closer." With every passing second, the mercenaries were growing more desperate, and their fire became even more erratic. They fired another round, this time hitting their left engine. Sparks flew from the console, and the ship jolted hard, sending everyone crashing into their seats. Engine powers down. I can't keep the ship straight, Kara gasped, trying to regain control. We'll get through this, Jace shouted, his eyes locked on the incoming ships from the fleet. The battle was about to shift in their favor. Hold on just a little longer. The mercenaries, knowing their time was running out, fired one last desperate shot. It sailed through space, cutting the distance between them and the ship in seconds. But just as it was about to strike, a massive explosion lit up the void. The mercenaries' ships were hit. Blazing trails of fire erupted from their engines as the fleet opened fire, tearing apart the mercenaries' forces in a barrage of laser fire. The enemy ships didn't stand a chance. Kara breathed a sigh of relief, her fingers still gripped tightly on the controls as she steadied the ship. We made it. They're done. Jace exhaled slowly, his body relaxing for the first time since the chase began. The danger had passed for now. We're safe, Jace murmured, looking at the massive fleet of reinforcements now surrounding them. The crew had made it through the storm, but the galaxy had just become more dangerous than ever before. They had escaped the mercenaries, but the real battle was only just beginning. The battle had only just begun. As the last of the mercenary ships exploded in a burst of fiery wreckage, Jace looked out from the cockpit window, seeing the massive fleet now surrounding them. It was a sight that could fill anyone with awe. 1,000 ships, their sleek, powerful designs gleaming in the cold light of distant stars. The fleet had come, but so had the unknown. The true enemies they had yet to face. Kara let out a long breath as she steadied the ship. We made it, she whispered, disbelief and relief mixing in her voice. Jace's eyes narrowed, staring out into the vast void. We made it, but it's not over. Not by a long shot. He glanced back at Draven, who was still seated at the communications panel. How long until we're in contact with the fleet's commander? Draven, looking drained but focused, tapped a few keys on the console. It's taking longer than I expected. There's a lot of interference. The fleet's dealing with its own issues, but we're getting through. Jace turned back to the front. They had dodged a major bullet, but their fight was just beginning. A new kind of enemy was out there, something bigger than the mercenaries who had chased them for days, something that didn't just want them dead, but was intent on erasing their very existence. We have no idea what we're up against, Jace muttered, but we need to be ready. We can't let our guard down. Not now. Kara nodded. She knew this battle was only a taste of the war to come. The real enemies were out there, and they were closing in. The fleet, though impressive, couldn't protect them forever. They needed more than firepower. They needed a strategy, and fast. Jace felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He wasn't just a pilot, a fugitive. He was a leader now. His crew had come through for him. He couldn't let them down. The sudden flicker of the comm system interrupted his thoughts. Draven spoke up. We've got contact. It's the fleet commander. Jace stepped forward, standing behind Draven, his mind racing. The commander of a fleet this size was no ordinary figure. They would have their own goals, their own strategies. Would they see humanity as allies or a threat? There was no telling. The comm screen buzzed to life, and a stern face appeared. The commander was a tall figure with sharp features, their uniform adorned with the insignia of the fleet. Their gaze was calculating, distant, but there was a flicker of curiosity in their eyes. This is Commander Elan of the Orion Fleet. We've received your distress signal. State your business and prepare to be boarded. Jace's heart skipped a beat. There it was, the moment that would define everything. We're not here to fight, Jace said quickly, trying to keep his voice steady. We were attacked by mercenaries. We need your help. The commander's eyes narrowed, clearly skeptical. You expect us to believe you were being hunted? By whom? Jace could feel the pressure mounting. He had to make them believe. He had to make them understand. The mercenaries are just the beginning. There's something bigger, something that wants to wipe us out. You have no idea what's coming. Elan leaned forward, clearly intrigued but still cautious. Explain. Quickly. Jace didn't hesitate. He had to get through to them. We've discovered something. The galaxy is not as it seems. There are forces, organizations that are growing in power. They've been manipulating events, setting up humanity as a target. These mercenaries are just pawns in a much larger game. The commander's eyes flickered briefly to their side, as though receiving reports from their officers. This sounds serious. But why should we trust you? Humanity is new to this galaxy. You've made enemies before. Jace's mind raced. He knew what the commander was thinking. Humanity had made a name for itself, an impression, but it wasn't always a good one. They had fought for survival, and that meant making difficult decisions. But now, Jace had to prove that humanity's strength wasn't just in their ability to survive. It was in their ability to fight for what was right, to stand up against the darker forces in the galaxy. We've been through more than you could ever imagine, Jace said, his voice rising with passion. We're not the villains here. We're not the ones you should be worried about. We're the ones who can stop the real threat. But we need your help. There was a long silence. For a moment, Jace thought the commander would turn them away. But then Elan's face softened just slightly. You have 5 minutes. You'll be boarded, and we'll hear your story. But know this, if you lie, if this is some kind of trick, you'll wish the mercenaries had finished the job. Jace nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. It was their chance. The fight for humanity's future was about to begin, and they had no choice but to put everything on the line. As the comm screen shut off, Jace turned back to his crew. Kira and Draven were already standing, ready for the next move. Their faces were serious, but determined. This was it. They had a chance to change everything. We've got one shot, Jace said, his voice calm despite the tension in his chest. Let's make it count. The ship moved slowly toward the fleet, its engines humming with anticipation. The crew had fought their way out of one battle, but the hardest part was yet to come. Whatever was waiting for them on the other side of this encounter, it would determine their fate, and the fate of humanity.